Welcome back to the channel. This week we're looking at something different. We're looking at the Bootstrap Navbar, that's with React-Bootstrap, and we're going to be implementing that with Next.js. Assumed knowledge for this video is you'll have the latest version of node.js and Visual Studio Code set up. And after completing this video tutorial, you'll be able to implement the React-Bootstrap Navbar with Next.js, and you'll be able to create active link states using Next's router. Before we start, a quick message from this video's sponsor. As a Skillshare teacher, I've partnered up with them to offer you a free 1-month trial using my link below. I personally produce full-length Hugo courses on Skillshare on a variety of topics, and there are many other great teachers on Skillshare ready to help you level up your skills for your next big project. Click on the link below for the 1-month free trial. You can cancel at any time and you'll be helping out this channel. So we're going to start in a terminal in the folder where you store all your web design projects. The command we're going to use is npx create-next-app, and this will create a folder for you, and this will ask the name of the project, which will also be the name of the folder. So I'm going to use video next bootstrap navbar. So it creates a folder for you and then it downloads all the dependencies for your project. So that's done. You will need to have npm installed for this to work, and obviously an internet connection. So we have some more dependencies to install. Inside the folder that was just created, we're going to open it in Visual Studio Code. We'll go to the terminal, new terminal, and we'll run npm I for install, bootstrap, and react-bootstrap. Bootstrap is for CSS and React-Bootstrap is for JavaScript and all of the React components. Before we get started with React-Bootstrap, we're going to go ahead and include the Bootstrap CSS. So we'll go into Pages and then API.js, and where the global CSS is being imported, we'll run on the second line import and put in some quotes. Bootstrap /dist /css /bootstrap.css. If you're not sure where that comes from, if you go into your node modules folder and look for Bootstrap, you'll see we have the dist folder, CSS, and then if you scroll down you'll find bootstrap.css. So I'll save that. So now whenever any page on your website is run, the Bootstrap CSS will be imported, creating the actual menu. There's one thing we have to do with our Bootstrap, and that is we have to import SSR provider and put the SSR provider around our entire app. That way IDs that are generated automatically by React Bootstrap match between the server and the client. I've left a link to this page in the description below. So let's go ahead and do it. Copy that line, paste it in, and then put some brackets around the component. And Alt-Shift-F to format it. So we've currently got the app.js, which is run for every single page, and the index.js, which is just for the home page. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder called components. And inside that folder, we will create a layout.js and a header.js. So we're going to work backwards here. The first thing we'll do in header.js is we'll create a function, const header equals, and we'll turn it into an arrow function. Return, create some brackets, and we'll put in a nav, and we'll just put the text header for now. And we'll do our default export. Export default header. Save that. Then we'll go into our layout.js and we'll create a function called layout with a capital L. Create an arrow function, return, and we'll put in main. Now for the text, we will use some curly braces. That's how we insert JavaScript. So we're going to be using props, and inside the main tags it will be props.children, and that's everything inside the opening and closing layout tags, which I'll show you in a second. Before we do that, we'll try and do some simplifying. Instead of using props.children, what we can do is we can destructure props. We can put in some curly braces and we can just extract children. So we'll go back here and we'll delete props. And what we can also do is we can get rid of the return and the curly braces. Because the first parenthesis is on the first line, we get an automatic return. JavaScript will treat all of this as the one line. So now we'll add our header. There's a cool thing you can do in VS Code. If you open up a tag and you start typing in the name of the component, you'll see it's got their header from header.js in the current directory. We'll tab across and it actually does the import for us. So I can just close that tag off. Now I've got an error coming up here. If you click on the errors button, you'll see that we're told that JSX expressions must have one parent element. And currently we've got two elements here. The way we solve that is we use a React fragment. And the shortcut for a React fragment is you open and close a tag with nothing in it. And that is a React fragment. So we can paste our code in there and then Alt-Control-F to format it. And then we'll export default layout so we can import it, and we'll save that. And then inside SSR provider but before component, we'll place our layout component. And then we have to import it, so import layout from, and it's currently up one level, then components / layout, and you don't need .js. And we'll save that, and then down in the npm script section, we'll click on the play button next to dev. You could run npm run dev if you like in the terminal, but this is much faster. And you can control click the link to open it in the browser. So we've got our header turning up at the top of the screen, which is exactly what we want. So let's get started now with the Bootstrap Navbar. So we're on the docs page for navbars with React Bootstrap. I'll leave the link to this in the description. If you scroll down, we're going to copy the first example. We've got all of the imports at the top, so we'll copy those first. And then in your header.js, we'll paste in those imports. It's important to note that we're importing from React Bootstrap and then / the actual component, and that means we're importing smaller files. For example, what you could do is import nav and navbar from React-Bootstrap, and that would work, but the thing is you're going to be importing a really big file, and that's going to slow down your app. So what you can do is the recommended method, and for nav we import from React Bootstrap / nav, and for navbar it's React Bootstrap / navbar, and that results in much smaller imports and faster apps. So we'll go and we'll copy the navbar part of the example. We'll delete what we've already got in the return statement. We'll paste that in. And then we can save that, and it should work because we've got all of our imports. And there's our example. The first change I'm going to make is the container. I personally like to use a fluid container, so the navbar is the full width of the screen. So where it says container, we'll add fluid. We'll save that and have a look. And now we've got a full width navbar. So now we have to set up the list of links that we'd like to appear in the navbar. So what we'll do is we'll create a constant, and you can name it whatever you like. I'm going to use menu links. It helps to put it in a plural. Equals, and we'll put an array in with some square braces. And for every one of our menu items, we're going to create an object using curly braces. So objects have keys and values. So the first key will be title, and the value inside some quotes will be home. We'll put a comma in, and then the next key will be path, and then with a colon, and then the path in some quotes will just be a slash. Put a trailing comma in. Then we'll put a comma after that object, and we'll create a new object with some more curly braces. I'm going to have to create a new page for this one. So the title will be about, and path will be slash about in lowercase. I'll put a trailing comma after about and the final curly brace. That isn't required, but it's inserted for me because I'm formatting it with prettier. So we'll save that. And then we'll make a page for the about page. So I'll go into pages and create a new file called about.js, and we'll make a function for it. So const about with a capital A equals open close bracket arrow function, and then we'll put in a return, a div, and we'll just write about for now. And so that it works, we'll create our default export for about. Go back into header, and now we have to iterate or loop over our menu links and generate some links. So under nav, what we'll do is we'll put in some curly braces because we're using JavaScript now, and we'll do menu links dot map open bracket. We have to open bracket again, and these are the properties we'll be using. The first property will be what's being generated by the map, and we'll just call that link if you like, or item, doesn't matter. But the next one is the index, and we'll call that index. Hit the right arrow to get after your closing bracket. Then we'll do a space, create an arrow function. Then instead of using a curly brace, we will use some brackets to get an automatic return. And then we have to put in our component. So what we'll do is we'll create a HTML component here. And you can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it menu item with capital M, capital I. I'm going to include the item, which is generated by the map, and that will be one of these. So I want to include both the title and the path, and the easiest way to do that is put in some curly braces, and we'll use the spread operator, which is 3 dots and then item. And what that will do is it'll break this whole object down into the title and the path. They'll both be inserted. Now, whenever you're using map in React, you have to include a key, and that way React knows what item you're up to in the list, and the key will be equal to index. Now, you can only use index if the data isn't going to change dynamically, and this data isn't going to change dynamically. It isn't being modified while our website is being run. Then we'll close the tag. Then we have to create our menu item function. So what we'll do is we'll do const menu item, create an arrow function and a return. And we're going to be pulling in title and path. Now by default it's props, but what we're going to do is we're going to do destructure that, and we're going to pull out title and path. Then what we have to do is we're going to get our nav.link. So we'll cut that and we'll paste it in here. Now the problem is that we can actually get this to work by default. So we'll put in title instead of home in some curly braces, title, and for the href we'll remove that, and in some curly braces, path. But the problem is that it's not going to work very efficiently with Next.js. If we use Next's link component, we can get things to work much faster, and also preloads pages that are linked. So what we'll do up the top of the screen, import link with a capital L from next/link. Then what we do is we're going to wrap our component in link, and what we'll do, we'll cut the href and we'll paste it in there. Put our closing tag after nav.link. Alt-Control-Alt-Shift-F to format. Now we have to get this to work seamlessly, we're going to pass the href into the nav.link. And when we do that is we put in a property which is pass href. So when this is rendered, the link actually won't be visible at all. All you'll see is this nav.link producing HTML. But we'll still get the benefits of next/link. So I'll save that. Before we continue, we will delete the second nav link. We'll leave the dropdowns for now, because we'll get to that in a moment. So I'll save that and we'll test it out in the browser. So we've got our home and our about coming up. The dropdown was actually manually coded. So we'll test the links by clicking on them. You'll notice we even get the active state coming up automatically, which is great. And if we right click and inspect, have a look, and we've got the HTML being generated by the nav link, but the actual next link is invisible. It's passed the href into the A tag, which isn't generated by the next link tag. So it's looking really good. So we're going to handle the drop downs. First thing I'm going to do is look at handling the actual drop down items, and then we'll get back to the parent element. So what we'll do is we'll cut one of those items, and then we'll go back up and we'll create a new function. We'll call it drop down item. Create an arrow function. And return. We'll paste that in. So what we're going to be pulling in is title and path. And we're going to wrap it in a link. So we'll copy the existing one. And then we'll close off the link tag and format it. We'll get rid of the href because it's already up in the link tag, and we'll copy in title. Make sure we're destructuring for our title and path, because props is what gets passed in. So that's working. We've then got to look at how we're going to actually generate the links in our list. So what we'll do is we'll make a new object. And this time we'll put a title in, and we'll call it dropdown menu. And then we have to create a bit of a structure. So we'll start off with submenu, and we'll use an array with square brackets, just like we did with menu links. And then it's a case of putting in some links. So we can paste in what we've already got if you like, make it easier for you. So inside submenu, we've got our home and about. So we'll save that. Then we have to go down and create some logic. So up here in menu item, we're currently straight away generating the nav.link, but we can do a check and we can find out whether the submenu property, the key, is present. If it is, then we'll go ahead and we'll create a drop-down menu rather than a standard menu. So what we'll do in our menu item, above where it's returning, and we won't just check for title and path, we'll also be pulling in a submenu, and that happens automatically because we're using the spread operator on item, so everything is passed through. So up above our return, we'll do an if submenu is true, that is if it exists, if there's data there, put in some curly braces, and we'll do a return, and inside that return we're going to grab the parent item for nav dropdown. So I'll cut that. And then we'll paste it in. We'll have to, for the title, we're going to get rid of the drop down in double quotes, and we'll paste in title with curly braces. We do need a unique ID. The easiest way to do that is we've got our drop down menu. We'll create an ID, and I'll just put 1 for now. Keep it simple. You can put whatever ID you like there, that way you can target it with CSS if you need to. So for ID, what we'll do is we'll put in some backticks. I have to put curly braces around the backticks. Backticks is for a string literal, and we'll put a dash in and then $ curly braces, and we can then pass in ID. We'll have to make sure we're destructuring, pulling out ID. I'm going to get rid of the word basic, so it's nav drop down and then the ID. We then have to loop or iterate over a submenu to pull out these links and generate some tags. So we'll do that is we'll use a curly brace because we're putting in JavaScript, and it will be submenu dot map, open and close brackets, and then we have to put in another set of brackets. So we have to place in the properties, and the first property is the actual data that's generated by the map. So we'll call that item, and then a comma, and then the next one's going to be index, and we'll just name that index to keep it simple. Then we'll use the right arrow to move across, space, create an arrow function. We'll use some parentheses for automatic return, and then we have to place in our drop down item component. So we'll create a tag drop down item. We're going to pass in item, but we want to destructure it because currently it's an object with the title and path keys. So what we'll do is in curly braces, 3 dots, and item, that automatically destructures it for us, and then we have to put in the key, and we'll use index to generate the key, and then we'll close that off. Then if you scroll down, we've got some broken HTML because we've chopped bits out of it. So what we'll do is we will delete it, but we're going to hang on to the divider for now. We'll get rid of the rest. So you'll have your closing nav tag. We'll comment out divider for now. We'll set that up in a moment. We'll just save that and then we'll test in the browser. So we've got our existing menus working. We've got our drop down menu with our 2 items. We'll just click on them to check they work. And they're working really well. You can right click and we'll check the HTML. And we've got our clean HTML output. We can't actually tell the difference between real Bootstrap and what's going on here. The advantage of using the React Bootstrap components is the actual JavaScript works out of the box straight away. So now we have to work on the divider. What we'll do is we'll cut that and we'll clean up our HTML. Then Alt-Shift-F to format. We'll go up to our drop down item, and what we'll do above where it returns, put in an if, and then in brackets divider, and we'll set that up in a moment. Some curly braces, a return, and what we'll do is we'll paste in that code. And what we'll do is we'll also pull in divider, and then we'll go back up into our drop down menu. We'll place a new object in, and we'll create divider true. You don't put any quotes around true because it's a boolean. Make sure you put a comma in between the objects. And now what's going to happen is the entire item we pass through automatically, so it doesn't matter what property it is, what key, and then we've got our divider text. Now, if divider, that will be returned, and that's the end of the function, and we don't actually go any further. But if it isn't divided, then we're going to have that second return. So we'll save that, and we'll check in the browser. So there's our drop-down menu. We've got our divider. If we right-click and inspect, you'll see there, I've got our divider coming up, HR. One more thing we can do, and that is active state. So when you first load the page, none of the menu items are active, but if we click on home, for example, you'll see it now becomes darker. If we inspect, you'll see that it's got the class of active added to it, but by default, if you reload the page from scratch, it hasn't got an active state added. So what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll set up active states for the menu items and the drop-down menu items. So back in header.js, we will import inside curly braces user router with capital R from next/router in single quotes. And then we'll go down to our menu item and we'll create const router equals use router, and we'll open and close brackets, so calling a function. So what we'll do is we'll start with our standard link. So I'm on the React-Bootstrap docs page for navbars, and I've left a link to this in the description below. Right at the bottom you'll see details on the API. It doesn't actually help us because the nav links are actually from the navs and tabs. So if you go at the bottom of navs and tabs, under nav link, we've got an property called active, and it's boolean to true or false. If we set active to true, it will turn that nav item active and it will highlight it. So what we'll do, we'll go back to our code, and in nav link, we'll add the active property equals, put in some curly braces. I'm going to write a statement, and that is router.pathname strictly equal to path, and the path is what we're pulling in when we generate the menus. So if the router.pathname, and that's the current path that Next.js is at, if that's equal to path, it will return true, and that will set our active to true. So I'll save that and have a look in the browser. So now when we refresh from scratch, our home link's coming up highlighted, so we know we're on the home page, and if we change to about, that will be highlighted as well. We've then got to go ahead and set this up for the drop-down menu and the drop-down links. So for the drop-down links, that's quite easy. All we have to do is copy the const router equals use router into the drop-down item function, and then we can copy our active property into nav dropdown.item. Save that and test it, and then we'll look at how to set up the actual drop-down itself. So I've just done a refresh, and I've deliberately put home into the drop-down so I can check if it works straight away, and it is being highlighted. And we'll go to about, and we've got that active state there highlighting. So let's go ahead now and work out how to highlight the drop-down menu. So inside the submenu conditional, we'll create a constant. We'll call it active child equals, and we'll look at the submenu dot find, open and close brackets, add another set of parentheses, and we will use item, create a arrow function, put in some curly braces, and then we'll do a conditional if router.pathname is strictly equal to item.path. So as we iterate through submenu, we're looking at the actual item.path, the path of each item. And if that's the case, we will return true. And if that doesn't happen, we will return false. And it's important that you put this constant inside the submenu conditional. If you don't, you'll get an error because submenu doesn't actually always exist. A lot of these menu items aren't submenus. Then we'll go into our nav dropdown at the end, and we'll put in the active property equals, use some curly braces because we're using JavaScript, and we'll put in the active child. it will return false and it won't be active unless one of the paths of one of the items is equal to the current path that Next.js has generated. So we'll save that and have a look in the browser. So we've currently got home active and the drop-down menu is active as well because we've got home in the drop-down menu. We'll go to about and it stays active. We'll temporarily disable home in this drop-down menu and we'll see what happens. So we'll highlight that whole object, Control KC to comment it out. And then we'll go back to home and you'll see our drop-down menu isn't active anymore. If we go to about, it becomes active because we're on the about page. So I'll uncomment that. So let's tie up our code. What we'll do is we'll create a new folder in the root of the project and we'll call it config. And then we'll make a file index.js. And then we'll export const main menu, make that an array, go back to our header and we'll copy everything inside the square brackets for our menu links, paste them in, we'll save that, back to header.js, we'll highlight the menu links, delete those, and then we'll import main menu as menu links from /config. And we'll save that. I'll have a look in the browser and the menu links are working great. We'll then have a look at the actual site title. So back in our config, we'll export another constant. Export const, we'll call this one site. And we'll create an object, so we'll use some curly braces. And we'll put in a title. This will be the title of the actual site. Use some single quotes, and we'll just call it whatever you like. For example, Next.js Bootstrap Navbar. Save that back into our header. So we'll have to import the site as well from config. And then we'll scroll down to the skeleton of the navbar. And then we'll use some curly braces and we'll do site.title. We'll save that and have a look in the browser. And we're pulling that in. So you could use that in many places in your site, not just the navbar, now that you've defined that in the config. So that's it for this week's video. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification so you get notified of my weekly videos, which I do on all kinds of different future and current static web design solutions. That's all for this week. Bye for now.